we're actually resisting love when we're afraid of it. And so why are we so afraid of love? What does love really mean? I think oftentimes we equate it to something romantic, and we also see it as weakness, makes us vulnerable, right? So we're going to kind of explore that. Right now you're actually hearing in the background a song titled, it's actually it's just called Manipura Chakra, which is your third chakra, your solar plexus chakra, however you know it. This is Cello Yoga playing this for us in the background. And the reason I did that is because, truthfully, in order to fully experience love, allow love, and not try to define what love is supposed to look like, then we can break through that fear. So to be empowered, it really takes a willingness to feel the fear and do it anyway. I mean, that's something that I know often gets talked about in the 12-step programs, but the fact is it really relates to all of us. This last week, I'm just really present to, I hear horns, really present to the shootings that have taken place and that continue to take place. And so this is central to love and the absence of love. Although it does bring people together, it does empower or inspire action, love for ethnicity, love for culture, love for life. And while this all goes on, I don't feel like we really, at what point are we going to break this cycle of hurting one another? I have a call coming in, so I'm going to take a break here while you listen to the music. I'll be right back. Okay, Marty, this is Tammy. Hello. Okay. I don't know who it was. And it was a strange thing. I just went to a dial tone. Anyway, so that's kind of where we're all at today. I just, like I said, wanted to talk about the fear of love and really being able to transmute it. This is what I talked about last week. Transmute that fear. It's not just about going, like dismissing it, but recognizing what is actually causing that fear. Fear is a part of life. It's not something that we can get rid of. It's part of our existence. It's a survival mechanism. And as I said, these tragedies that have occurred just this last week have really inspired a lot of love. At the same time, I'm seeing an awful lot of anger. Now, mind you, that's my human interpretation. That's, who am I to sit here and say that people aren't acting in love and people are acting in fear? You can, in many respects, view what occurs. You can, if you just pay attention to how it feels when you listen to them, you might actually feel their anxiety. Okay, this is going to be fear. We're afraid of this is going to happen again, right? So why do we fear love? As I mentioned, it does create our relationship to the idea of love it's weak. It makes us vulnerable. It's, we have these cliches that love is blind, that when we love somebody, we aren't aware. And I would argue that and say that doesn't mean that's love. We can overlook things. Love will, it's not that it makes you blind, it makes you more accepting of what is. We lose the ability to accept when we become afraid of something, when we become anxious. This is all fear related. And I think that our biggest challenge is really being able to recognize that fear is natural. And if to transmute that fear into love is having the willingness to speak that fear. That's the best way I know how to say that. It's not about, I know there's a lot of people that might talk about, well, we're going to, we'll take that fear and turn it into excitement. I talked about that last week. We'll feel that passion, we'll allow it to feel like passion and use it positively. You know, anger is also on that scale of passion. We can talk along those lines, but I say if we just transmute it, which means we recognize that this is what it is, and we use it, we accept it. We accept the fear as a warning. We pay attention to the fear. We don't necessarily have to buy into the fear. We don't have to react. Reacting is very different than responding. Responding takes a point in time, and it just allows us to pause. And then we move from there. That would be love. We're faced with things every single day that cause us to feel fear. Anything that we can ever label as a threat. You're now listening to Heart Chakra by Chakra Awakenings. Because what we're trying to do is actually feel this love. Again, love doesn't mean that we back down. There is such a thing as tough love. Okay, it means we stand for what we look for, the win-win. Doesn't necessarily mean being aggressive, but it does mean being bold. So how can we use that fear as a way of launching into love? What is it protecting us from? And can we begin to talk ourselves into off the ledge, basically? And if we can't do it for ourselves, who in your life will help talk you off that ledge? This is where the pause comes in. Because we typically, when we feel fear, want to jump and do something right away. We want to just deal with it. And again, unless your life is being threatened by something serious, like potential car accident, or you're being attacked by another human being or an animal, I mean, serious tragedy. You're facing serious tragedy. Unless that's what's actually happening to you, you actually have the opportunity to talk yourself off the ledge and allow somebody else to help talk you off the ledge, actually help you process what this fear is all about. The lineup of music I have today is actually rather interesting. It's all over the board. A lot of it has to do with different perspectives of how we navigate life, where we lose sight of ourselves. There's an awful lot of shoulds in this world. But the fear of love, fear of loving ourselves, first and foremost, that's what I see is the biggest culprit for what we're facing, whether it be, healing our own bodies and our own minds, or helping to heal a community. It really requires us to be in that space of loving ourselves. I'm not talking about being a bulldog or a bulldozer and just like plowing your way through fear. That's more reacting. I mean, if you could really do it solidly with a clear head, and you're committed to, and you feel very, very inspired, and you can see the win. And the funny thing about it is these words are all subjective. I mean, really, what is a win-win? If somebody's hurting you, how can you create the win for them? What would the win look like for them? One of the songs I have today that I will I will play for you shortly, addresses school shootings. It's a great song. You probably all have heard it if you've listened to this kind of music before. Not what you're listening to right now, or not what you hear right now. But it addresses school shootings. And in that piece of art, that creation that this group put together, POD, they explore what was going on inside the shooter. And I think that's a really wise place to be. Instead of being angry, what if we actually started looking at all of this crap that's happening around us and start wondering not necessarily why, but what was the motivation? What did they do this for? What were they seeking? I mean, we can all, based off the information that we're getting, we can all begin to speculate. I mean, there's an awful lot of, forgive me for saying this, propaganda going around right now. But we weren't in the head of that individual. We aren't in the heads of any of the individuals. We are only at the receiving end of information that somebody else other than the individual put out there. That's called propaganda. Next week's show is actually going to be on just that, neuromarketing. But right now, I just want to focus on really beginning to find that love. And the only way that we can be in that space of inquiry is if we begin to understand ourselves. We can't even begin to explore or be curious about somebody else if we don't take the time to be curious about ourselves. What motivates us? What is causing us to feel this? Neil Donald Walsh said it perfectly. Years ago, I was reading one of his books. More than likely, it was one of the Conversations with God books. I'm pretty sure it was one of the first three. And he referred to the word reaction. And ever since then, I've completely stopped using the word reaction unless I was talking about a hasty action. Because in his definition of reaction, and as I said, all words are subjective, really. We look how the words piece together, reaction. We are reacting out a historical experience. And so the only way to break the cycle of reaction is going to be being curious about ourselves. And the only way to be curious about ourselves is to actually be in that space of the willingness to love ourselves. Realizing that we are afraid. But when a child is afraid, if you're a parent or you've ever been an adult around children and they're afraid, for the most part, we don't sit there and tell them to suck it up, get over it. We encourage them. We help them we help to soothe them. I'll say it that way. We reassure them. And again, like I started to say a little while ago, unless your life is absolutely being threatened, you have the ability to talk yourself off the ledge through reassurance. And empower yourself to access something more. Again, this actually helps to relieve the distress that the body is feeling. It actually helps to stabilize the body. It allows you to create something new as opposed to recreating the past. That cliche, right? History repeats itself. You know why it repeats itself? Because we are reacting. And then we pass on a story, and that story gets shared around, and everybody starts buying into the story because they're not thinking for themselves. Interestingly enough, everything that I'm saying right now is actually this music I've got lined up today. So yeah, the idea here is to stop listening to these stories. If we don't want history to repeat itself, then it's up to us to start responding as opposed to reacting to what happened before and how it was handled in the past. If historically you have had a series of bad relationships or difficult and challenging relationships, I'll put it that way. Pardon me for saying so, but you are the common denominator. Just hands down, you're the common denominator. So what is it in you that continues to recreate these events, to repeat history? And what are you seeking? The anxiety, all of this that goes into a difficult relationship. How can you heal yourself so that this no longer occurs? I was sitting around a conversation one time, and they were talking about why men are a-holes. And I had to speak up and say, they're not. It's the dynamic in the relationship that brings out the a-hole in both parties. They were wondering why women were attracted to, something like that. And I just thought it was a very fascinating thing. And what I can say is that we create these events. And so learning how to love ourselves through it is the next step. I'm going to set you off here with a song titled Stillness is the Move.